everyone to the first webinar of the year from the Spanish Water Dog Club of America. We are very happy to have Art Morgan here with us, who's on our board of directors and is in charge of he's a director for the Western region, and which also covers doing rescue for the club. So I'm gonna let him get into it in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to mention that if anyone here is not already a member of the club, please go to our website and consider joining us. We would love to have you. And I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Donna Perrone. I'm the president of the club. That's why I'm giving you the plug. And I'd like to basically give a rah-rah to Art for bringing up this topic within our organization. We have happen to have a breed who's very good at three things. And we know a lot about the herding parts because we have entered that into the AKC as our group since we became recognized by AKC in 2015. And we know a bit about the waterworks somewhat, not as much as herding, but hunting isn't something we've heard a whole lot about within our organization. And so I think it's wonderful when Art mentioned that he wanted to share with us what he has learned about hunting with our breed to the rest of the country here. I was all in. And so I'm very excited to hear what Art has to tell us and learn all about how our dogs have been able to learn through the centuries how to serve us in so many ways, not the least of which is hunting. So Art, it's all yours.
Sounds good. Thanks, Donna. So a few other housekeeping things before I dive in. This is an outline of what I'm going to cover. I'm going to try and cover a lot, but I'll allow time for Q&A at the end, and I'll stay on as long as you want if you've got questions. I'm going to do a drawing after the session is over and give out a gift certificate and some hunting dog training equipment just to kind of incentivize you. This is the website URL. I'll put the contact info and this at the end as well, and also include it in the email follow-up that I send out. But if you want to sign up for the Spanish Water Dog Club of America, which I encourage you to do, this is the URL. This is my email. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Travels with Paco. Just a disclaimer and content warning. The views, opinions, and theories in this presentation are my own. They're not necessarily consistent with other board members of the SWDCA or the AKC. And also this presentation includes some videos and images of birds and rabbits being shot with firearms and dogs carrying these animals. It's not particularly violent, in my opinion, especially compared to the things you see on PG-13 movies and TV these days, but just wanted to give that heads up. I want to start with a quick story about Paco, my older Spanish water dog, and what prompted me to get started in hunting with him and how I went about that. We got Paco about 5 years ago in Spain, picked him up in a small town farming community in northwestern Andalusia. We picked him up at 10 weeks old and took him on a little mini vacation with us around and carried him everywhere. And then flew back with him on a direct flight from Madrid to San Francisco. We did everything we could to socialize him. We were told, and my mother is a kind of dog expert, make sure you expose him to old people, young people, people in uniforms, people in wheelchairs. So we did all that. Very literally, I took him everywhere with me. He outgrew this stroller quite quickly, both from a size perspective and an energy perspective. We took him to dog parks and introduced him to all kinds of dogs. And I also, this is Paco at 1 year old. I did literally 5 different training obedience training courses with him, multi-week training courses by the time he was 1 year old. And right about 1 year old, he passed the Canine Good Citizen um, certification, barely. And I say barely because he was starting to show by that time, at 11 months, he started getting a little protective, both of me and other family members and our house. And so the part of the test where he had to like pass calmly when another dog and handler approached us and went past us was the biggest challenge for Paco. Um, we live near a little downtown area named Burlingame, and I take Paco for walks there pretty much every morning, and we meet up with friends along the way who have other dogs. And one day, about when he was about 1 year old, we had got our coffee in the morning, and we were standing outside the coffee shop, and this attractive, well-dressed young woman came kind of running towards the door of the coffee shop. Um, and I'm sure she just had ordered her coffee on the app and was late for her train and was running in to pick up her coffee and go off and catch her train into the city. But Paco understood none of that. And to him, this was a dangerous intruder coming into his people's space. And he just launched off on her and went into full guard dog mode. This is not Paco. This is just an animated GIF that I found on the web. Remember, Paco was much bigger than that. He looked like this. And I just saw a look of sheer terror on this poor young woman's face. Fortunately, he was on leash and no harm was done. But this is how I felt when that happened. I was just mortified, and I made a decision at that point that I had to do something different. I had to give him a different job than being, guard dog or bodyguard. So around that same time, I met a fellow in the dog park who had a hunting dog, and I knew that he hunted with his dog. It was a Brittany, because he would do some drills and practice exercises in one corner of the park. And so I asked him, do you think it's too late for me to start training Paco to be a hunting dog? And he said, oh no, you've got all this great obedience experience. I can tell he's a natural retriever. You should go for it. And so he gave me all sorts of advice on how to do this. And this hunting season had just ended, so I had like 10 months to prepare. And I went all in on this training as well. I signed up for video training courses and got books, and some of which I'll tell you about later. When we went on trips, I would stop in any place that had water or kind of places that would be good practice areas for upland hunting. And as you can kind of tell from these pictures, Paco's attitude did change. He became more attentive to me and what I wanted him to do next, and less worried about kind of guarding the perimeter, clearing the perimeter around him. So after 10 months or so of training, we decided that Paco was kind of ready to try his first hunting experience. And I went with my daughter and Paco to a private hunting club where we could have a big space to ourselves and kind of controlled situation. I'll just play this video while I explain this. Shows a little bit of clips of it. And, Paco was like a kid in a candy shop in a good way, though, because he's honoring his training. But when he saw his first bird, it was just like a light bulb went off. And it was almost like he was saying to me, Dad, I was born to do this. Why did you wait so long to let me do this? And I remember, one of the first birds he flushed, I took a shot at it and I either missed entirely or maybe just barely winged the bird. And it flew like 150 yards, like from where Paco is to that tree that you see in the distance. And it landed in an area where there was big, tall grasses and a ditch, and I thought, boy, there's no way we're going to find this bird. But we sent Paco after it. My daughter and I went, followed him, and got up to the grassy area. We saw the bird running into the deep grass, and after about a minute or two, Paco went after it. A minute or so, he comes trotting out with the bird in his mouth. So from that point forward, both I and Paco were hooked on this. So that's my little story about how I changed his job title from bodyguard to bird dog. Some of the side benefits of hunting as well. You obviously build a connection with your dog. I didn't think about this, but you really build a connection with your environment and nature as well. You have to understand the habitat where different birds and animals live, and what types of plants are needed, and what sorts of things we're doing to the environment that are not good for wildlife. So it's really built my knowledge of the environment and nature. Also built my connection with food too. I learned to cook for the first time, and can actually help with some of the cooking now. And it builds connection with the cultural traditions from the past. And this is both in terms of water dogs, and I think most of you are Spanish water dog owners. I did put this out to some of the other Southern European water dog groups as well. But I think this applies to both all water dogs, learning the tradition of hunting, and to our own traditions. My parents were not hunters, but one of my grandfathers were, a lot of my great grandparents. And I think, I'd wager that almost all of us, if you go back far enough, you've got at least a few hunters in your family tree. So it's a way to kind of connect with that part of your own ancestry too. So next, I want to go over a little bit of history of water dogs and Spanish water dogs in particular. And I know not all of you are history nerds like me or like Lisa Harper, but I think it's important that you understand at least a little bit of this, because if you get into this, you're gonna hit up against skepticism from all angles, really, from both ends of the culture war spectrum and from everywhere in between. So it's important to understand a little bit about the history.
Can I, excuse me, Art, could I just ask one little question, or should I wait? My question is, when you first said your beginning about Paco and being, on leash and whatever, and then all of a sudden attack, all I could think about was Mia, and my brother wrote to me, gee, Mia, my dog.
Yep.
Do you think, Paco had been leashed, and now Paco was out in the element, out in the open, doing his thing. Would that have anything to do with anything? Being out there, if I let her run rampant to go after a bird, would she go do it?
Well,
being restrained from doing what she may need to do, and maybe react a little better and differently to things.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some truth to that, and certainly a lot of dogs are more reactive when they're on a leash than when they're not, right? So that's part of it, but also I think if the dog never has that off-leash training experience, they don't learn how to control themselves, and so I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the training section. So why don't we come back to that? But
sounds good. I'm done. Okay.
That is a good point, though. So, and feel free, by the way, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll try to address them as we go through this, but just as a kind of placeholder, feel free to use the chat as well. So before I go into the history, let me talk about what's the definition of a water dog. And a lot of people, especially here in North America, think they take a very literal definition of water dog and a broad definition, thinking, oh, it's a dog that does stuff in the water. But if you look at the group classifications in Spain and the FCI, which is the umbrella kennel organization, kennel club for continental Europe, they're in a group that's for hunting dogs, and water dogs are a type of hunting dog. So this group 8, includes retrievers like Labrador retrievers, golden retrievers, flushing dogs, which are mainly the spaniels, and water dogs. And water dogs are essentially dogs that do both of these things, retrieving, flushing, but they're specialized for water. So all of the water dogs that we know of or that are related, like the Lagotto and Barbet, are in this group, as well as Irish Water Spaniels and American Water Spaniel even. So keep that in mind as we go through kind of what is the history of water dogs. I'm going to go way back first, before water dogs were really developed, and point out that people have been hunting and recognized the need for dogs to help with the hunting for a long time, hundreds and even thousands of years. This, on the left, I have some duck decoys that were made from reeds that are carbon dated to 2,100 years ago. They're found in Nevada. In the center, we've got a Egyptian drawing of somebody hunting with bow and arrow for birds, with a dog there, presumably helping. And on the right, I've got a book that was written in 1576 that it's the first reference to the term water dog that I found in English. It was actually translated from Latin. And it talks about how the water dog is useful for retrieving the arrows that miss their targets, arrows and spears. And I hadn't even thought of that, but certainly before firearms, if you're trying to shoot a bird, you'd miss more often than not. So that would be another useful feature of water dogs. And I don't know what kind of water dog they were talking about here, but the point is that there's been this recognized need for hunting dogs specialized in the water for several hundred years at least. Now, what I did to try and pin it down a little bit more is look specifically in Spanish for references to water dog, or perro de agua. I don't know any other European languages other than Spanish and English, so I had to focus it, and I was, obviously focused on Spanish water dogs as well. And you start finding, I found a lot of references actually in the 1700s, starting in the 1700s, and a lot of them in the 1800s. I'm going to show you just a few here. The one on the left was from 1849. It talks about how they're intelligent, skillful. They throw themselves into retrieving things with a singular instinct. They have an admirable understanding, and they'll even retrieve their master's cane for them. And a little picture that was in this book that looks similar to a water dog, right? The middle one is a dictionary of hunting dogs, and they refer to perro de agua, and they also use these other terms, two other terms, kind of interchangeably with water dog, barba and lanudo. Lanudo translates as woolly, basically, and barba is like beard, which maybe is the Spanish equivalent of Barbet, which is a water dog from France. The one on the right here is another hunting dictionary, and it also referred to water dogs and said that they're the only type of dogs that you should use to remove birds that fall into the water, but you should have them well taught so that he doesn't scare the birds with his runs. So they were using this term water dog as well for hunting with near water.
Art, can I interrupt just briefly? If everyone could mute so we don't get background noise, that would be helpful. And thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I can. Okay, so one last example here from the history books, the Cuban hunting manual by a fellow named Enrique Manera y Cao. At first, I thought this was maybe, not really about Spain, but as I read through it and researched the author a little bit, I realized it is really mostly about Spain. This fellow lived in Cuba, but he considered himself a Spaniard through and through. He even, this was 1886, when the Americans took over control of Cuba, a few years later, he moved his whole family back to Spain. He talks in this book about, let's see, the water dogs from Alicante region of Spain, which is on the Mediterranean, were his favorite. He said they're bluish or greenish eye, curly hair. They are very knowledgeable and easy to train, circumstance which recommends them to collect dead and injured game in the water. So certainly Alicante, which is in between Valencia and Cartagena, Spain, would be a logical place for hunting waterfowl. On the right here, I show a map of the different flyways, and the eastern, what they call the Eastern Atlantic Flyway, is right along this part of Spain here. So those are a few examples of the history and how this term water dog was used in Spain and Europe. I'm gonna show a couple of video examples here. Some of you have already seen these. This is from a documentary that was done in Spain about Spanish water dogs, maybe in the 90s or late 80s, judging by the car and the clothes. But I want to show first a Spanish water dog retrieving a duck, and then I'll explain a couple things afterwards. Okay, so I waited all the way to the end there because first to show that was a long retrieve, and also to show that that dog clearly has some training. It may look easy, but average dog, even a lab or a retriever breed, would not do that without some training. And he brought it all the way to the owner's hand without dropping it. The first instinct of most dogs is to, when they get out of the water, is to drop whatever they're holding and shake. So that was a well-trained dog. But if you think that's good, wait until you see this next clip. As most of you probably know, ducks, some types of ducks dive to get food, and they can stay underwater for up to a minute, dive 30, 40 feet. And they do this normally for getting food, but they've also developed this defense mechanism where if they're injured and a predator is pursuing them, they'll sometimes dive to get away from the predator, hoping to trick the dog. And usually that would work, I think, with average dog, but if you've got a water dog, that's not enough. So let's watch this. Hope it comes with the duck. So that was obviously, probably staged for the cameras a bit, but I have seen several Spanish water dogs that can do this sort of thing, and it's definitely a testament to their persistence that some of the writers from the 1800s mentioned, because I guarantee you that the average lab or golden would not be able to do that, or not be easily trained to do that. So that's waterfowl hunting. I want to talk about another type of hunting that we call in the North America upland hunting. It's sometimes called small game hunting, or caza menor in Spanish. The most common species or animals that you'd include in this small game hunting in Spain are the red-legged partridge and different types of rabbits. There are others like quail and certain types of grouse as well, but I'm going to mention those two and show some examples of that. And you may be asking or thinking to yourself, like, why would you use a water dog for upland hunting? And I have a couple explanations for that. One is upland birds need water too. In fact, even the ones that are relatively, don't need a lot of water, they do like to roost at night in the trees and bushes that grow near rivers and streams, just to protect themselves from predators. And then during the daytime, they go out into the fields and eat seeds and berries and so on. So having a dog that's good on the water is useful for finding and fleshing those types of birds. The other reason is a little more complicated, and this has to do with a tradition in Spain called transhumancia, which is basically a seasonal migration of livestock, usually sheep, from one place to another, in search of kind of greener pastures, basically. And the Spanish royal crown, this goes back way to the Middle Ages, up through maybe 1700s. They would allow people to move their livestock along these routes they called cañadas. And as you can see, a lot of these routes end up near the water. They start inland and into the water, or vice versa. So this 9 and 10 in near Valencia and Alicante that I mentioned earlier. Some of these end up near Sevilla, which is inland, but it's on the Guadalquivir River, which flows to the ocean and has a lot of marshy areas there. And then up north here too, we have cañadas in Basque Country that go from water inland. And Basque Country, by the way, is where the first shotgun manufacturers in Spain started, so and continued to this day. So Basque Country has a kind of stronger hunting culture than some parts of Spain. But the point here is that there was a lot of migration of the dogs that were used with this transhumancia. And the theory is that the ancestors of the water dogs were actually herding dogs, or maybe livestock tending dogs would be a better term for it, because they could act as a kind of invisible fence, keeping the livestock within a certain group and also keeping the predators out, which it kind of makes sense and would explain a lot of the behavior of Paco and some other water dogs if this theory about their development is true. So let me talk a little bit about the partridge, red-legged partridge in Spain. This is a map of their current range. The purple is where they're found. Dark purple is where they're more frequently found. And in fact, in the 1800s, when the water dogs were developed, the partridge would have been much more abundant. They were as common as like crows are now here in suburban areas, according to some of the hunting books that I read, history books. On the right, I've got a manual of hunting partridges that was written in, let's see, 1875. It doesn't prescribe a particular type of dog that is useful or breed of dog. They just say you need a dog that's good at retrieving and is quiet when it's flushing, which Spanish water dogs are, of course. And I also point out that the small game hunting at this period, up until about 1900, was not really regulated. Big game hunting was, because the royalty, what they liked to do when they hunted was go for deer and wild pigs and the large animals. So the kind of commoners were left to their own devices in terms of hunting. And I'm sure that that the Spanish water dogs of the time were one of the types of dogs that helped with partridge and rabbit hunting too, which happens in rabbits are also in the same sort of habitat as partridges. In fact, I have some examples of them doing that later in the 1900s. I'm going to show a video of that too. And before I do, I just want to point out a couple things about flushing dogs. So on the right here, I have a Labrador Retriever. These are 4 different types of dogs drawn to scale. Labradors are at the high end, let's see, 23 inches, no, 24.5 inches at the shoulders. Portuguese water dog is second from the right here. That's it's about 19.7. So they're, also, and this is consistent with what their skills are too. Portuguese water dogs are good retrievers, but they're not really known as flushing dogs. Then I have a Spaniel and a Spanish water dog. English Springer Spaniel is 20 inches and Spanish water dog 19.7 is kind of the high end of the range. So why do they need to be smaller or shorter? That has to do with the fact that to get in and get underneath the brushes and briars and so on, they need to be closer to the ground. So I'll show an example of that. This is a Spanish water dog flushing and retrieving a partridge. A couple of things to point out on this one. You'll see the dog kind of catching a whiff of the partridge with air scent, changing direction suddenly, and then using kind of ground scent and sight to find the bird and kind of home in on the bird, flushes it out. And then the other thing to notice is when it retrieves it, this bird is still alive and it's still flapping. And so, and the dog brings it all the way back, which is consistent with that statement, earlier from some of the 1800 books that they're really persistent retrievers with a strong prey drive. So let me play this. Now it has to be persistent, takes a couple tries to get a good grip on it, but really wants to bring this bird all the way back to its handler. And so that too takes both instinct and a lot of training. A lot of dogs, like I said, labs even, let me pause that. A lot of dogs, even hunting breeds, they'll be scared of a moving bird like that once they get it. So that is a sign of a good upland hunting dog. I won't show the rabbit retrieving just in the interest of time, but I will include this in the links. As I mentioned, the rabbits occur in a lot of the same places as partridges, and Paco certainly has flushed a lot of rabbits. I have yet to successfully shoot one, but someday I hope to. Let's go on. Okay. Lastly, on the history piece, let's talk about the 1900s for a little bit. 1900s were a hard time for Spain. At the beginning of the 1900s, in 1902, they did an update to the hunting laws. And basically they made it more stricter rules for small game hunting. I mentioned that it was more informal before, but they said, here are the seasons, here are the times of day when you can hunt. You can't hunt on private land unless you have written permission from the owners. You need a license for both your firearm and for hunting, and you have to get that from the regional capital. So all of these things are normal and probably necessary to preserve the numbers of small game, but it made it harder for the average person to hunt. So it was probably the start of a decline in the popularity of hunting at this point. And then it went from then things got really bad in the middle part of the century. 1930s, Spain descended into a civil war. The winner of that war was a man called Francisco Franco. He was a dictator, buddies with Hitler and Mussolini. You can see on the left here a rally for him in 1937, people holding up his pictures and doing a kind of Heil Hitler style salute to him. He had a kind of ministry of propaganda and culture that controlled what was appropriate for Spanish culture and what was not talked about. Anything that had to do with that kind of might imply that Spain was a poor country was not officially mentioned and kind of shoved under the carpet. And things that implied that they were strong and masculine and industrial were the things that were promoted. And it even infected the image of hunting, because on the right here, I have a hunting lodge that Franco had built for himself. It's in Andalusia, northern Andalusia, not far actually from where Paco was born. And he evicted 5,000 families from the land here, planted pine trees where only olive trees and chaparral were before, brought in deer and wild pigs, had his people feed these animals, deer and pigs, until they were so fat that they could barely move. And then he went in with his rifle and shot them. So that really had a big negative effect on the image of hunting in Spain, especially in this southern area where he did this. But I don't want to end on a sad note. The good news is that Franco died in 1975. Things started opening up again. People started reviving the small game hunting, including with Spanish water dogs. This is a picture of somebody from a hunting magazine with a Spanish water dog and a red-legged partridge. And the founders of the breed in Spain also recognized that, and that was part of the video clips that you saw. So hopefully the image of hunting and small game hunting in particular was not damaged too much, and now it's up to us to kind of help revive that and carry on the tradition here in North America. So let's talk about training a little bit. And I have a few resources here. Feel free to post questions if you have any. But the first thing I point out is, like I did with Paco, it's generally accepted that you should do a lot of obedience training as the kind of first step. Do it up through at least the intermediate level. Work on a strong recall, obviously, I find, recall, heel, sit and stay. Also, leave it is something that they taught us in one of our obedience classes that I find really useful in hunting. So if they come across a smell of something that you don't want them to go after, you say leave it and kind of move on. This book here, Sporting Dog and Retriever Training, by a fellow named Mike Stewart, is really good. My daughter gave this to me for Christmas, I think. And it's got a lot of detailed examples of both how to train for retrieving, upland hunting, even British style driven hunts, the whole 9 yards, pictures, diagrams of how to do the training exercises. And it's a nice coffee table book, so you can have it on your coffee table, and it's good conversation starter. So I highly recommend that book. If you're into video, I highly recommend Cornerstone Gun Dog Academy. That's for retrieving training. Upland Institute is for the upland skills. It's designed for pointers, and water dogs are flushing dogs, not pointers. Pointers are basically dogs that find the smell, find the bird, but then freeze and point at it, right? And they usually aren't very good retrievers or good at flushing, because they're kind of trained to have that restraint, and instinctively they have it as well. But the Upland Institute has a lot of the basics that apply to flushing dogs as well. So if you want a video course, you can use that. Gun Dog Supply is got a lot of good equipment, so I would check that out. I'm showing here a couple things that you'll probably want if you get into this. On the left here is a dummies or bumpers from a company called Dockin, and he designed these. This fellow named Dockin designed them to teach the dog to pick up the birds in the right place and have what we call a soft mouth. So the head and the feet are hard plastic. And so they need to pick it up in the middle. And if they also learn not to shake it, because it'll slap them in the face if they do that. You'll also eventually want to get some like wings, and you can get dried wings from quail wings or pheasant wings from Gun Dog Supply, and you strap it onto your dummies, and that gives them a sense of the feathers, which is a little bit foreign to them at first. And then finally, if you want to just get started without any guns or birds or anything, I recommend AKC Fetch. It was designed by retriever people. Doesn't involve water yet. Hopefully, maybe we can convince them to add on some water pieces to it. But if you can get through all 4 levels of AKC Fetch, you've got a pretty well-trained retriever. And if anybody's doing this and needs any tips or wants to share any challenges, please reach out to me, because I'm working on it with Paco too. And so the advanced level, where you have to do 3 memory retrieves in a row, is pretty challenging, but certainly Spanish water dogs are up to it. So, and a couple other resources on training, or just things to point out. Craig Pope, the Chesapeake Kennels, is a fellow that does a lot of duck hunting on the East Coast in Virginia and the Chesapeake Bay. He's one of the few people that I know about in North America that are doing this. But if you know of others, please let me know, because I want to, like I said, track your successes. In the UK, there's a lot of groups, but you can join this one I'm showing here, Spanish Water Dog Working Gun Dog Club on Facebook. They're posting a lot of their training videos, so you can join that and kind of follow along and learn from that as well. So, questions. Let's get some more questions. And Estelle, if I didn't cover yours, I can come back to that, but Do we have any other? Oh,
No, I I think you did. Thank you.
um,
So I think I have a question. So I think you covered this, Art. I mean, I think I always thought of there being um different kinds of hunting dogs that you went through, the pointers, the retrievers, the flushers, or whatever you call that. Um,
mhm.
with what you've shown me with the Spanish water dog, they're both retrievers and is flusher the right word? I feel like it's toilet talk. Um,
Flushing dogs is the more formal term, but I call them flushers sometimes.
okay. And so I mean, I understand with the pointers, they're just kind of like point and you have to go shoot. With the flushing and the retrieval, I always thought that was kind of an either or. So is this
Hmm.
really a both?
Well, no. So let me clarify that. So the well, yes, they do both. So flushing dogs usually do a couple things. So they use their nose to find where the birds are, although you might use a pointer to do the initial find because pointers can they run long distances. And so if you've got a bird that's not very common and you need to cover a lot of ground, you might have a pointer that goes and finds it. And then you send your flushing dog in to flush it. And then the flushing dog would also go retrieve it. And that's where this retrieving skill is useful because a lot of times the birds will land in bushes or, grassy areas that are hard to find, and they'll run on the ground, right, to hide even further. And other times they'll land in the water. So you need that retrieving skill. Now, retrievers were um, uh, developed to mainly help with waterfowl hunting. So that's more kind of you sit and you have your decoys and you wait for them to come in and then you send your dog out once a dog has been shot. But people today do use retrievers for flushing as well. Does that explain?
Yeah. I guess I'm still trying to understand why they selected the way they have group 8 there. You know,
Hmm.
they show three different kinds of dogs. And I see, even though water dogs is there separately, I almost see them as being part and parcel to the other two as well. So it's a little confusing to me on how they've, split them up.
Right. Yeah, and it is confusing. It's not a perfect grouping, but the essentially the water dogs are like flushing dogs, but they are fine-tuned for water.
Okay.
And does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand because you've got group 7's the pointing dogs. So group 8 is really dogs that can retrieve, flush, and swim.
Yes.
Pretty much. Okay.
Yeah, and because spaniels and retrievers obviously can swim too, and it's just they're not quite as good from what I've seen at the water aspect compared to like a Spanish water dog.
Okay. All right.
Um, and you'll notice here too that like other dogs that do stuff in water, like Newfoundlands, are not in this group. They're in a different group. Um, so that's why I say that water dogs really is a kind of hunting dog. Of course, they do more than that now. And Portuguese water dogs is a good example of that. The story now about Portuguese water dogs has evolved into kind of more of a boating thing, but originally they all did some hunting, I think.
Okay.
Um, what else? Any other questions? Let's see, we got a chat. Do you have to do scent training? Good question. So yeah, I didn't cover that very much, but it does help to do some scent training. And so if you what I did with Paco, kind of preparation for the hunting was I got some the pheasant wings and quail wings, and I did as I showed, attach them to a dummy, and then I would hide them in different places in our backyard and ask him to go find it. And he quickly picked up on that. You can also buy little bottles of scent for different types of birds and inject it into those dummies, either canvas or the rubber dummies like the dock and dummies. And that's a good way to do it too. The scent, what I've found is the scent of the land, the upland birds tends to be pretty similar. So they can transfer from pheasants to grouse and so on pretty well. But ducks smell quite different. So I've had to get some frozen ducks from people with feathers to use for training Paco, because he wouldn't pick them up at first. And we're gonna do, I don't know if you're near Washington, but I'm gonna bring some of these scents and wings to the waterwork day that we're doing in July before the show. So that's a bit about scent training.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on when we have our national specialty, of course, the weekend of July, what is that, 6th and 7th? And we have some things happening there for people who want to come and see the dogs at work and meet them and meet each other. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have going on with the fetch?
Yeah.
Trial?
So
I guess it's not a trial. What is it?
it's just a practice workshop, basically, and fun pickup and picnic and meetup. So I'll include the links to it in my follow-up email, but the specialty is on Saturday, and there's shows also on Sunday and Monday. But on Friday, July 5th, we're going to meet at Nolte State Park, and we'll be there from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. roughly. And we'll have a picnic shelter area set up that's right on the lake. And we'll have some buoys and stuff. And what I want people to do is practice their retrieving first on land, like start doing AKC fetch. And then we'll do one of the easier levels of fetch in the water, which is kind of the first step to this training. And if you're really getting good, you can do longer retrieves or even blind retrieves, which is something that your dummy is hidden behind the boat, for example. And we'll also have the opportunity to do the scent training for finding and flushing, as I mentioned. And then we'll do some we'll have a picnic lunch, kind of potluck lunch, and around 2 o'clock or so, we'll do some awards. That's the plan.
And you want to tell us about this new
an AKC fetch competition. So it's there's 4 different levels to it. Let me go to the link here. And it's basically, it's all on land, but we're going to have the club in conjunction with the Puyallup Valley Dog Fanciers group. We're going to run fetch tests on Saturday and Sunday. Basically what it is it's hard to explain because there's 4 different levels, but there's a lot of video examples here. Basically at the easiest level, the novice level, you have to retrieve a ball or toy that's 30 feet away. The dog has to retrieve it, and they do that 3 times, I think. And then the next level, the intermediate level, they do it at 50 feet. And then the advanced and retriever levels, the dummy is or bumper is thrown behind or dropped behind a blind. So you have to train your dog to follow a line. You point it in that line and send it out, and it has to retrieve one or two or three things that are behind blinds, and so the trick is kind of training them to follow that straight line. So that'll be both Saturday and Sunday at I think we're starting at 8 a.m. But it'll be going throughout the day.
So, yeah, I was just going to point out that if anybody needs more information on our national specialty, it is on the website, swdcaclub.org. Did I get that right? swdclub.org. And you'll find a link to the specialty out in Washington coming up in July.
Yeah, and definitely feel free to reach out to me as well if you have questions on Fetch or the Waterwork Day on July 5th. I'd love to see a few people get, novice and intermediate before that July event, so we can have some strong showing for Spanish water dogs. I'm going to try and get this weekend the intermediate level for Paco, so we'll be ready for advanced.
Do we have any other questions for Art?
No, good job, Art.
Thank you.
Well, I think Art has definitely shown us that, we've always known that Spanish water dogs are a triple threat in terms of their history. They herd, they hunt, they swim. It's sport the water work. It's hard to pick one that's the best that they do because they seem to do all of them so well.
They protect.
That comes along part and parcel with some of the other stuff. But I think, Art, you've really given us a great overview of how to hunt with the dogs, at least in North America. I understand there's some differences in other parts of the world in their approaches, but we're kind of it's a new thing for us in the US, other than I forgot his name in Virginia.
Craig Pope, yeah.
Craig Pope, yeah, who's been doing it since the onset. They do have a history, a strong heritage in those skills, and I think it's great that we're getting some people interested in demonstrating what they're capable of doing. So thank you so much for taking the lead on this for us and helping us clear the path to yet another leg on our three-legged stool of fun with our dogs. All right. So anything else you want to say, Art?
I just say, it is new in North America for us, but one of the things that I'll point out is that our hunting style that we can practice here in North America is very similar to what they would have done in Spain, and especially in the western part of the US, we have wild birds that are very similar to those red-legged partridge, and lots of public land that we can go to use it. So I think it's really a good opportunity for those of us who have water dogs here.
Great. All right, thank you. Hopefully, we'll be doing some more webinars coming up for the rest of the year. We'll see what happens, and I hope everybody learned as much as I did. We'll see you next time.